Welcome to Wendy's Art. This is part 2 of a painting of a ficus tree that I did in acrylics. This is a commission piece, and the second part here is the foliage, the bird, and just all the finishing touches. This is the first time I've actually painted a tree as the main subject. I've painted sort of many trees in the background, but it was really interesting to do this tree, and it's a tree that is local, so I was able to go and visit it, which was really nice. Take some photos, have a look up through the branches to see where they all went. It was really lovely. So yeah, so stay with me and we will now move on to, I'll just do a commentary. I've sped it up because it was so long. So you can actually change your settings and slow it down if you want to. But here we go. This is Painting a Ficus Tree Part 2. So here I am starting the foliage, and I've chosen a green black. I wanted to do the darks first. Using a fan brush. It's good for leaving gaps and not making big blocks of colour. I did want to have the sky poking through as much as possible on this first layer. So I used the fan brush for a little while, and then I switched over to a different brush. Yeah, I suppose I was just sort of trying them out to see how it went, but the fan brush did a pretty good job. So I'm just moving around the tree, just trying to get the clusters of leaves. The ficus tree has lots of clusters, so it was not easy, but it gave you good blocks of leaves to try and get in there. So now I'm using that other brush. Looking at it now, I think the fan brush was probably better, but I was pretty happy at the end because I had lots of sky showing through. So now I've moved to a Liquitex marker, just adding in the next level of green. Still a darkish green, but I thought I'd give this paint marker a go. I've got lots of them and I very rarely use them, so I thought this would be a good chance to use the fine tip just to do those leaf shapes. It did a pretty good job. You just have to keep pushing on it pushing it down to sort of get the paint to keep coming down. But yeah, this was a good way to do that sort of detail. The only disadvantage to the paint markers is you can't mix the colour. But this is the sort of green I was looking for, so that was okay. But on the next lots of layers getting lighter and lighter, you only really have a choice of bright greens, which really wasn't going to cut it. So I took advantage of this layer to be able to have a nice workable tip. It was quite good. So just working my way around the tree, just trying to I am starting to get some of those details in, especially at the tops. Tops and sides have lots of wispy runs of leaves. And for the rest of the tree, I'm just trying to get in the clumps of big clumps of leaves. Also trying to fill in a bit more of that blue, because in actual fact there wasn't a lot of blue showing through behind this ficus. It's so dense with its leaves. So just filling some of that blue in, getting some of the bulk of the tree in with the dark green. Okay, so I'm onto the Fineliner brush now, and I've mixed a green and yellow. I'll put the colours in the drop down box below so that you can see what colours I use, but I'm adding a sort of a yellowy green now, just to try and put some lighter shades in. I'll still be doing some highlights, but this is just probably helping me to identify now where all the different clumps are, because it can start to look like one big clump after a while. So I'm just working my way around the tree, trying to give the sense of the leaf shapes and the way the leaves are going. The Fineliner was quite good for this, but I did have to keep having breaks because your hand gets quite tired after doing so many little dabs after a while. So make sure you have breaks, get up, walk around, give your neck a stretch, give your back a stretch. it was quite a long process. So I've sped this up to 20 times and got this one down to 26 minutes, so you can imagine how long it actually took. And continuing to work around the tree, working from my reference photo. I'm not trying to do a totally photorealistic painting, but trying to get as close as possible, but I still like it to look like a painting, like an artwork and not like a photograph. So working around again. Still got the midsection and the right hand side to do. It's a big tree. The canvas it's on a stretch canvas, it's 18 by 18 inches. I was thankful that it wasn't any bigger than that because it was a big job. I think this tree took me, I started preparing the canvas on Monday, and today's Friday, so it's taken me 4 solid days of working on the tree and 1 day just to prepare the canvas with the gesso. I did put an absorbent ground on there just in case I wanted to use any pencils or other media, but I didn't end up doing that. So, but the absorbent ground was quite nice to work on. Okay, I've gone for a bit of a darker green yellow here. Putting some of the darker leaves in. Now back to the light again. So it does pay to add all these different tones and hues of colour because it really does give the tree some depth. It's nice to have those real darks in the back. And then just working your way forward, getting lighter and lighter. It is easy to get lost in a photo when you're painting a tree like this and trying to work out where you are and which clump goes where. Sometimes it helps to divide the tree into quarters, and that can help with your placement a little bit. I did do that to sketch it, but I didn't do that at this point. I sort of figured that, you know, the tree just had lots of clumps, and if I could generally get them, you know, in the right place and linking up to each other and covering up all those darks, leaving some darks showing. There are some shadows in the tree where the darks are coming through, so just trying to follow those things and making sure that your tree has some darks, some lights and some midtones. The darks are important for giving you the depth, as are the midtones, and then the lights, of course, give you that pop at the end. Okay, so still trying to fill that tree up on the right hand side there. Working in clusters, linking them up where the reference photo suggests they're linked up. Okay, adding a bit of blue to my green mix here just to get some of those darks in again. And just to add because these leaves are sort of in shadow at the bottom, I've just made them a little bit darker, and the blue was useful just to make those darker hues. Okay, so after doing those darker ones at the bottom, I'm back into the lighter ones again. Again, seeking out those shapes and clusters. working on the lights on the ends there, bits that are sticking out in the sun. This photo of the tree that I took was in full morning light, sunlight. So basically the whole tree had highlights on it. Not everywhere, but a lot of the tree had lights and bright spots. Okay, another cluster of leaves. Nearly there with this one. Okay, what I'm doing now, I did use a couple of different greens there. So what I'm doing is mixing a glaze of permanent sap green, and what I'm doing is just brushing that on to the tree all over, just to unify that green colour a little bit. I'm sort of feeling like there's greeny white bits and greeny yellow bits in different shades. So I'm just correcting that by adding this glaze, and you'll see when I get to the end of the glaze that it does a great job of just unifying the whole tree. Still keeps your lights and your darks, you don't lose that, but I'm planning to go over with highlights anyway, so that's not a problem. So in actual fact it's probably providing me with just a few different sorts of tones there, which is great because I'll come over after this and start adding my real highlights in my final highlights. So I'm using a thickish brush, not too thick, but a solid brush there to add the glaze with. And what I'll then do is swap to a finer brush to do the highlights. Just continuing on, adding that glaze. I've used a glazing medium to make that glaze up. It's best not to use water because you lose your colour, you lose the vividness of the colour. The glazing liquid maintains the colour and gives you just a very light coating of that colour, and it's translucent so you can see what's underneath. It's quite a long process, this. You just got to work your way right around the tree, trying not to miss anything. So just turning the brush on the side there when I want something a little bit finer, and when I'm wanting to get a big area down, I'll use the flat area of the brush. Okay, so now I've moved on to the Fineliner brush, still glazing. So I've left those outer areas with the finer leaves there for the Fineliner brush. So just glazing those outer bits. But if you can look at the rest of the tree, it's done quite a good job on unifying that colour. You can still see your lights and your midtones and your darks, but it's a more consistent green. So I'm happy with that. That was a good decision. So as you can see, there's lots of fine details there to pick up. Lots of little leaves. But it was well worth the effort to do. I really think it's improved the tree enormously by just unifying that colour and giving me that base now to then go in and add the final highlights with. It's a really nice green, the permanent sap green. It worked well. and I sort of, while I'm watching you doing this, it's quite a process. It was really good to actually go and visit the tree, and I highly recommend that if you're doing a commission for somebody and you can actually go and get photographs. I know it's not always possible, but when you can, it's so much better when you've actually seen the object. Like I've seen the tree, I saw it on a beautiful fine day, I could take lots of photos, close-ups of the leaves, I could see where it was, the park it was sitting in, and because the client wanted me to do a Swamphen, it was great to actually get a photo of the Swampens from that little area, because Swampens can change depending on where they are and their location. So it was really helpful for me to actually get the exact Swamphen and be able to get some action photos of him. And I chose a photo of him with his foot in the air so you could see his long toes, just to give him a bit of interest. So as you can see, I'm still working my way around the tree, just still doing that glaze. Just got all those top areas to do now. I've got to say the Fineliner was perfect for doing this. It just gives you those fine details that you can add in. As you can see, I'm actually covering up some areas with that glaze as well. Just trying to block in some areas that need a bit more bulk. So when I do the final highlights, what I'll be doing is really carefully looking at the reference photo and trying to make sure that I've got the bulky clusters of leaves in the right areas. You can see straight away what a difference that green glaze makes. As soon as it goes on, the whole area just lights up. So yeah, it was really good. Okay, so finally I'm back to the trunk. Just trying to refine the shape of the trunk, getting in the knobbly bits, just correcting it as I go, and adding some of the details, the little marks. I'm adding some of the white. The trunk has quite a sort of a whiteness to it, so I brushed some whites on to lighten that up a bit, and just doing a few highlights and details on the roots there, just giving them some lights and darks. Okay, fine details on the trunk. Getting some of those dark little patchy lines in. Okay, I use the paper towel when I paint something on it, and I don't want it as dark as that, but by dabbing it with the paper towel it leaves it there, but just gives you that just that minimised colour, which is what I was looking for. So it's a good way of knocking it back really quickly and easily. You don't lose it. Okay, so what I'm doing now is going over the shape of the tree and just making sure, oh no, I'm doing the branches, so just popping any little branches in. It didn't have a lot of branches that needed to go in at this stage. Some trees have lots of them, but no, I didn't have too many at all. So what I'm doing now is using a darker green. I'm just trying to bulk up the tree where it needs bulking up. So areas that I feel needs a bit more shape and more leaves, I've chosen that sort of sap green type colour, and I'm just now refining the shape of the tree, putting some darks in where the leaves fall behind the tree and on the other side. And now going in with my yellowy green highlights. So trying to concentrate on those big sections, those clusters or clumps of leaves, trying to get them in the right place and the right size. Okay, this is a fairly important part of the tree. It's where you get to sort of make any corrections and just bulk anything up that needs bulking up and make sure everything's in the right place. And when it is, then you can go in with your highlights and basically all of those shapes that are sitting there come alive. Gives it that pop of colour that you need to really highlight those different parts of the tree that are being lit by the sun. And as I said, it was in full sunlight, so there was quite a bit of it lit by the sun. Just working along the top, filling in those areas with highlights. My hand was getting quite tired by this point. I think I'll be painting leaves in my dreams tonight. Okay, so continuing on, and I don't do all of it in highlights. I am adding some darker greens as well, and then going in highlights over the clusters where the sun's shining. Okay, so I think I've basically added the areas that I wanted to, and going over in the bright highlights now. Yep, I've got the yellow out there. So just trying to pick up those very bright highlights. Okay, so just finishing off the trunk there. Back on the roots again, just refining things. Just putting in those last minute leaves. Just noticed a few that should go down there. Okay, and I think that's just about it for the tree. Okay, now I'm on to the Swamphen. So I did block in the colour initially, and now I'm just refining the details on the Swamphen. Was quite difficult to do because he's so tiny. Trying to get, I really like to get the detail in the eyes, and he had such a tiny eye. I could barely do a pinprick for his pupil and the highlight. So yeah, he's a tiny little fella. But I'm just trying the best I can to get the direction of the feathers and the darks in the right place, the lights in the right place. Okay, so popped the white of his eye in, but I think I'm finding that it's just a bit too big. And that was the smallest paintbrush that I had, so I think I do go back and refine that eye a little bit. Okay, just trying to get some details on the beak. Again, it was pretty tiny. Everything on him was pretty tiny. But yeah, just follow the directions of the feathers, and now I'm just trying to do his feet and his legs, just trying to get a few little details on them. It was really hard trying to get the little nails on the end of the feet, on the toes. Okay, so now I'm just putting some browns in just for the dirt on the ground, and just trying to give in the grass area I've tried to keep it fairly abstract and random. I didn't want to do any super fine details of the grass. I thought the tree was the focus, and I've just done a few strands of grass at the bottom and then just a few little blades of grass throughout. And along the top where the sky meets the grass, I've just done a fine layer of whitish sort of grass where the sun lights it up. Bit of grass around the bird, and then just some random odd patches of grass throughout. Okay, so coming up to the finishing touches here. So right at the end I have a photo of the finished painting. So that'll be coming up any second. And basically, yeah, these are just the finishing touches that I did, just a bit of grass and a little bit of highlights, few darks, few lights, using a bit of a paint pen there just to do the final bits of grass. So thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed following along with painting an acrylic ficus tree. I did try to find some YouTube videos to watch on YouTube, but yeah, I couldn't really find a ficus tree. So if anybody wants to paint a ficus tree, this is the video to watch. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you picked up a few tips. As I said, I'll put the colours in the drop down box below. So thanks for joining me, and thank you from Wendy's Art.